The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone corridors of Kensington Palace. Kate stood by the window of their private sitting room, her fingers trembling slightly as she held a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quite organize. Something felt different today, though she couldn't explain what it was. William had been away for 3 days on official business in Scotland. The children had asked about him every evening, and Kate had smiled through their questions, assuring them their father would return soon. But today was the day he was supposed to come home, and Kate felt an unusual nervousness settling in her chest. She heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway below. Her heart quickened. Kate set down the teacup and smoothed her hands over her dress, a simple blue one that William had always said brought out her eyes. She walked toward the entrance hall, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. The staff had already been alerted to William's arrival. Kate noticed how they seemed to exchange glances as she passed, their expressions difficult to read. Mrs. Henderson, their longtime housekeeper, gave her a small, knowing smile that made Kate's stomach flutter with uncertainty. Kate reached the grand entrance and waited. She could hear voices outside, the security detail speaking in low tones. Then came the sound of the door handle turning. Her breath caught in her throat as William stepped inside, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman Kate had never seen before. She was elderly, perhaps in her late 70s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue, and despite her age, she carried herself with remarkable dignity. She wore a simple coat and carried a small leather bag. William's face was serious, more serious than Kate had seen in months. He looked at her with an expression that held both apology and something else she couldn't identify. Love, perhaps, or was it concern? "Kate," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "There's someone I need you to meet." Kate's mind raced through possibilities. A distant relative? Someone from William's military days? An old family friend? But the way William looked at this woman suggested something deeper, something more significant. The elderly woman stepped forward, and Kate noticed her hands were shaking slightly. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Kate, studying her face with an intensity that made Kate feel exposed and vulnerable. "Hello, Catherine," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "I've waited so very long to meet you." Kate looked at William, searching for answers. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring despite the confusion swirling through the room. "Perhaps we should sit down," William suggested, guiding them toward the morning room. "This is going to take some time to explain." The three of them settled into the comfortable chairs near the fireplace. Kate's heart was pounding so loudly she was certain the others could hear it. She noticed how the morning light fell across the elderly woman's face, highlighting features that seemed strangely familiar, though Kate couldn't place why. William cleared his throat. "Kate, this is Margaret Hartley. She came forward 3 weeks ago with information about our family. I've spent the last several weeks verifying her story, and I needed to be absolutely certain before bringing her here." Margaret reached into her leather bag and pulled out an old photograph. Her hands trembled as she held it out to Kate. The photo showed a young woman, barely more than a girl, holding a newborn baby. The woman in the photograph had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "That's me," Margaret said quietly. 63 years ago, and that baby I'm holding is my daughter." Kate studied the photograph, trying to understand what this had to do with her and William. She looked up, meeting Margaret's tear-filled eyes. "I was very young," Margaret continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Only 16. My family was poor, working class. When I became pregnant, my parents were devastated. They sent me away to a home for unwed mothers. I stayed there throughout my pregnancy, hidden from everyone we knew." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She could sense where the story was heading, but her mind refused to accept it. "After she was born, they told me I had no choice," Margaret said, tears now flowing freely down her weathered cheeks. "They said I was too young, too poor. They said my daughter deserved a better life than I could give her. So they took her from me. I only held her for a few hours before they took her away." William squeezed Kate's hand gently. His own eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "I never stopped thinking about her," Margaret continued. "Not for a single day in all these years. I tried to find her when she turned 18, but the adoption records were sealed. I tried again and again over the years, but every door was closed to me. Kate felt her throat tighten. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered, though part of her already knew the answer. Margaret reached out with a trembling hand, hovering just inches from Kate's face as if afraid to touch her. "Because, my dear Catherine, you are my granddaughter. Your mother, the woman you knew as your mother, was my daughter. The baby they took from me all those years ago." The room seemed to tilt. Kate felt William's arm around her shoulders, steadying her. She tried to speak but couldn't find words. "Your mother was adopted by the Goldsmith family," Margaret explained. "They renamed her Carol. She never knew about me. The adoption agency never told her. But I never stopped searching, and when she passed away, I thought I'd lost my last chance to connect with her." Kate's mind flooded with memories of her mother. Carol Middleton, the woman who had raised her with such love and devotion, the woman who had taught her to be strong, to be kind, to never give up on her dreams. "How did you find me?" Kate managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret smiled through her tears. "After your mother died, I kept searching. DNA testing has become so advanced now. I submitted my DNA to one of those ancestry websites, hoping against hope. And then 6 months ago I got a match. A distant cousin who led me to another relative who led me to another. The trail eventually led to Carol's family. To you," William spoke gently. "I had our people verify everything, Kate. Medical records, DNA tests, adoption documents. It's all true. Margaret is your grandmother. Your blood grandmother." Kate looked at the elderly woman before her, seeing her with new eyes. Those blue eyes that had seemed familiar, the shape of her face, the way she held her hands. Kate suddenly saw reflections of herself, of her own mother, in this stranger's features. Tears began to stream down Kate's face. She couldn't stop them. All her life she had known only one grandmother on her mother's side, the woman who had raised Carol as her own. But now sitting before her was a piece of her mother that Kate had never known existed, a living connection to the woman she missed so desperately. Margaret reached forward slowly, giving Kate time to pull away if she wanted. But Kate didn't move. Margaret's wrinkled hand gently cupped Kate's cheek, and the touch was so tender, so filled with years of longing, that Kate felt something break open inside her chest. "You look so much like her," Margaret whispered. "Your eyes, your smile. When I saw your photograph in the newspaper all those years ago, when you and William got engaged, something in my heart recognized you. I couldn't explain it then, but I felt it. A connection I didn't understand." William stood up quietly and moved toward the door. "I'll give you two some privacy," he said softly. "Take all the time you need." Kate nodded, unable to speak. As the door closed behind William, she found herself alone with this woman who was both a stranger and family. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with all the years they had missed, all the moments that could have been. "Tell me about her," Kate finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell me about my mother when she was born. Tell me everything." Margaret's face lit up despite her tears. She settled back in her chair and began to speak. "She was born on a rainy Tuesday morning in June, the smallest, most perfect thing I'd ever seen. She had a full head of dark hair and the most beautiful little hands. I counted every finger, every toe. I memorized every detail of her face because somehow I knew I wouldn't have long with her." Kate listened, absorbing every word. These were details her mother had never known about her own birth, details that had been lost to time and closed records. "They let me name her, at least for those few hours," Margaret continued. "I called her Grace. I thought it was the most beautiful name in the world. Of course, her adoptive parents changed it to Carol, which is also beautiful. But to me, she'll always be my little Grace." Kate felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. Her mother's middle name had been Grace, Carol Grace Middleton. Had that been a coincidence, or had her adoptive parents somehow known? "What happened after they took her?" Kate asked gently. Margaret's expression grew distant, as if she were looking back through the long tunnel of years. "I cried for weeks. My parents told me to forget, to move on with my life. They said I was young and there would be other children. But how do you forget your own child? How do you move on from that?" She paused, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief she pulled from her pocket. "I finished school. I got a job at a local shop. I met a good man named Thomas when I was 21. He knew about my past, about the baby I'd given up. He didn't judge me. We married and we tried to have children, but it never happened. The doctor said there was no medical reason. Perhaps it was just fate's way of reminding me that I'd already had my one chance. Kate reached out and took Margaret's hand. It felt fragile, like holding a bird. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Margaret shook her head. "Don't be sorry, dear. Thomas and I had a good life together. He passed away 5 years ago, and I miss him every day. But we were happy. We traveled, we volunteered at the church, we had nieces and nephews we doted on. It was a good life. But there was always a space in my heart that belonged to the daughter I'd lost. And now to know that she had a beautiful life, that she had children of her own, including you, it fills that space with light." Kate couldn't hold back anymore. She stood up and moved to Margaret's chair, kneeling beside it. "Thank you for finding me," she said. "Thank you for not giving up." Margaret wrapped her arms around Kate, and they held each other while they cried. It was a release of decades of grief, of missed opportunities, of love that had nowhere to go. But it was also a reunion, a bridge across time connecting grandmother to granddaughter. After several minutes, they pulled apart. Kate sat back on her heels, looking up at Margaret with red, puffy eyes. "Did you ever try to contact her?" "My mother?" Margaret nodded sadly. "When she turned 18, I tried to find her through the adoption agency. They said the records were sealed and Carol had not registered with them seeking information about her birth parents. I wrote letters to the agency, hoping they would pass them on, but I never knew if they did. When she turned 25, I tried again, and again at 30. Each time I was told the same thing. The records were sealed, and unless Carol initiated contact, there was nothing they could do." Kate felt anger rise in her chest. "That's not fair. You should have been able to find her." "The laws were different back then," Margaret explained. "They thought they were protecting everyone involved. The birth mothers, the adoptive parents, the children. They didn't realize how much pain those closed records could cause. How many people spent their whole lives wondering about the family they'd lost." Kate stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where her children often played. She thought about George, Charlotte, and Louis. She couldn't imagine being separated from them, couldn't fathom not watching them grow up. "My mother died never knowing about you," Kate said quietly. "She never knew she was adopted. Her parents never told her." Margaret gasped softly. "She didn't know?" Kate turned back to face her. "No, they kept it a secret her whole life. After she died, we found some old papers in the attic. Birth certificates, adoption papers. That's how we discovered the truth. But by then it was too late to ask her about it to see if she'd ever suspected." Margaret covered her mouth with her hand, new tears streaming down her face. "I wish I could have known her. I wish I could have told her how much I loved her, how not a day went by that I didn't think of her." Kate returned to her seat and took both of Margaret's hands in hers. "She was wonderful," Kate said softly. "She was kind and strong and funny. She built a successful business. She raised my siblings and me with so much love. She taught us to work hard, to be humble, to treat everyone with respect. She would have been proud to know you." Margaret smiled through her tears. "Tell me more about her. Tell me everything," and so Kate did. She talked about her childhood, about the parties her mother had organized, about the advice Carol had given her before her wedding to William. She talked about how her mother had handled the pressure of having a daughter marry into the royal family, how she had remained dignified and graceful through all of it. She told Margaret about the last conversation she'd had with her mother before she died, about the wisdom Carol had shared about raising children in the public eye. Kate talked until her voice was hoarse, sharing every memory she could recall, painting a picture of the life Margaret's daughter had lived. Margaret listened to every word, occasionally asking questions, sometimes laughing, often crying. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The sun had moved across the sky, changing the light in the room from morning gold to afternoon amber. There was a soft knock at the door, and William entered carrying a tray with tea and sandwiches. "I thought you might be hungry," he said gently, setting the tray on the table between them. "The children are asking about you, Kate, but I told them you were having an important meeting and would see them later." Kate looked at William with such love and gratitude. He had known about Margaret for weeks and had carried this secret, wanting to be sure before he brought this woman into their lives. He had protected Kate from potential disappointment while doing all the investigation necessary to verify Margaret's claims. "Thank you," Kate said, her voice filled with emotion, "for everything." William kissed the top of her head. "Take your time. I'll keep the children occupied. He turned to Margaret with a warm smile. It's wonderful to have you here. I hope you'll stay for dinner, and longer if you'd like. We have plenty of guest rooms. Margaret's eyes widened. Oh, I couldn't possibly impose. You're not imposing, Kate said quickly. You're family. Please stay. I want you to meet the children. I want them to know their great-grandmother. Fresh tears welled in Margaret's eyes. Great-grandmother, she whispered, as if tasting the word for the first time. I never dreamed I would hear those words. After William left, the two women shared tea and sandwiches, though neither had much appetite. Kate found herself studying Margaret's face, looking for resemblances, trying to see pieces of her mother in this woman's features. What was your life like? Kate asked. After you married Thomas? Margaret seemed grateful for a topic that wasn't quite so emotional. Simple but happy. Thomas was a teacher. We lived in a small village in Oxfordshire. Everyone knew everyone. I worked at the village library for 30 years. I loved that job, being surrounded by books, helping children discover the joy of reading. Sometimes I would see young mothers with their babies, and I would wonder if my daughter looked like them, if she was happy, if she ever thought about me. Kate squeezed Margaret's hand. I wish she had known. I wish she had been able to find you. But at least I found you, Margaret said with a watery smile. And through you, I can know her. The children she raised, the life she built. That's more than I ever hoped for. Kate stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down several photo albums. She returned to her seat and opened the first one. These are from my childhood. This is my mother when I was born. And here she is at my first birthday party. Margaret leaned forward eagerly, drinking in the images of the daughter she had lost. Her fingers hovered over the photographs as if afraid touching them might make them disappear. She was so beautiful, Margaret whispered, and she looked so happy. They went through album after album. Kate showed Margaret pictures from family holidays, school events, Christmas mornings. She pointed out her father, her siblings, all the people who had made up her mother's world. This is from my wedding day, Kate said softly, turning to a photograph of her with her mother. Carol was adjusting Kate's veil, her face glowing with pride and love. This was one of the last photos we took together before she got sick. Margaret touched the photograph gently. She lived to see you married to the prince. She must have been so proud. She was, Kate said, her voice breaking. But she was proud of me long before William came into my life. She always told me that my worth wasn't in who I married or what title I had. She said my worth was in who I was as a person and how I treated others. She sounds like she was a wonderful mother, Margaret said. Her adoptive parents raised her well. They did, Kate agreed. But she had goodness in her that came from somewhere deeper. Maybe it came from you. Margaret shook her head. I only had her for a few hours. Any goodness she had, she developed on her own. You gave her life, Kate said firmly. That's the greatest gift there is. And she gave me life. So you're part of me too, part of my children. Your blood runs through us. The weight of those words settled over them both. 3 generations connected by blood, though 2 had never met. It was a tragedy and a miracle all at once. Would you like to see the children now? Kate asked. They're probably getting restless. Margaret's face filled with nervous excitement. Are you sure? I don't want to overwhelm them, Kate smiled. They're tough kids. They can handle it. Besides, George has been asking lately about his family tree for a school project. This will give him something really special to share. Kate called for William, and a few minutes later he arrived with all 3 children. George, at 10 years old, walked in first with the confidence of a young man who knew his place in the world. Charlotte, 8, bounced in with her characteristic energy. Louis, just 6, held tightly to his father's hand. Children, Kate said warmly, I'd like you to meet someone very special. This is Margaret. She's your great-grandmother. George looked confused. But we already have great-grandparents. Kate smiled gently. This is your great-grandmother on my mother's side. It's a bit complicated, and I'll explain it all to you later. But for now, just know that she's family, and she's traveled a very long way to meet you. Charlotte stepped forward boldly. Hello, I'm Charlotte. You have pretty eyes. They're blue like mummies. Margaret laughed, a sound of pure joy. Hello, Charlotte. What a beautiful name. And yes, your mummy and I do have similar eyes. That's because we're family. Louis was shyer, staying close to William. But George approached Margaret with curiosity. How are you our great-grandmother if we've never met you before? Margaret looked at Kate, uncertain how to answer. Kate knelt down beside George. Sometimes families get separated for reasons that aren't anyone's fault. Margaret wasn't able to be part of Granny Carol's life, but she never stopped thinking about her. And now she's found us and we get to know her. George seemed to accept this explanation. He extended his hand formally to Margaret. "It's nice to meet you. I'm George." Margaret shook his hand, tears streaming down her face once again. "It's an honor to meet you, Prince George. You look very much like your father." The children stayed for about an hour, asking questions, showing Margaret their toys, telling her about school. Charlotte insisted on demonstrating her latest ballet moves, while Louis eventually warmed up enough to show Margaret his collection of toy dinosaurs. George talked about his history lessons and the football matches he'd been playing with his school team. Margaret watched them all with wonder, occasionally touching their hair or holding their hands, as if she needed physical proof that they were real. When the nanny came to take them for their evening routine, Margaret looked exhausted but happier than Kate had ever seen anyone look. After the children left, Kate noticed how tired Margaret looked. The emotional day had taken its toll on all of them, but especially on Margaret, who had carried the weight of her secret and her search for so many years. "Let me show you to your room," Kate said gently. "You must be exhausted." William helped Margaret up from her chair, and together they walked through the palace corridors. Kate led them to one of the nicest guest suites, one with a view of the gardens and plenty of natural light. "This is beautiful," Margaret said, looking around the elegant room. "But are you certain this is appropriate?" "I'm just a simple woman. I'm not used to such grandeur." Kate took both of Margaret's hands in hers. "You're my grandmother. You belong here. Please make yourself comfortable. If you need anything at all, just press this button and someone will come to help you." Margaret nodded, overwhelmed. "Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for accepting me, for not turning me away." Kate felt her throat tighten with emotion. "How could I turn you away? You're family. You're a connection to my mother that I never thought I'd have. I should be thanking you for finding me, for being brave enough to come forward." After ensuring Margaret had everything she needed, Kate and William returned to their own rooms. Kate collapsed onto the sofa, suddenly feeling the weight of the day crushing down on her. William sat beside her, pulling her close. "How are you holding up?" Kate shook her head, unable to find words at first. "I don't know. I feel like I'm in a dream. This morning I woke up as one person, and now I'm someone different. I have a grandmother I never knew existed. My mother had a whole other mother who loved her and never stopped looking for her." "It's a lot to process," William agreed, stroking her hair gently. "I wanted to tell you as soon as she contacted us, but I needed to be absolutely certain. I couldn't put you through that emotional roller coaster if it wasn't real." Kate turned to look at him. "Tell me everything. How did she find us? How did you verify her story?" William leaned back, organizing his thoughts. "She contacted the palace about 6 weeks ago. At first, security thought she was just another person claiming to be related to the royal family. We get those letters all the time. But something about her letter was different. It was detailed, specific. She included information about your mother's adoption that wasn't public knowledge." Kate listened intently as William continued. "I had our people investigate quietly. We obtained your mother's original birth certificate, the one that was sealed when she was adopted. Margaret's name was on it as the mother. We also looked into Margaret's background. Everything she told us checked out. The home for unwed mothers where she stayed, the hospital where she gave birth. All of it matched the records." "And the DNA test?" Kate asked. "We arranged that carefully," William explained. "Margaret submitted her DNA and we compared it to yours. You share 25% of your DNA with her, which confirms she's your grandmother. There's no doubt, Kate. She's who she says she is." Kate felt tears streaming down her face again. My poor mother. She never knew she was adopted. She never knew there was a woman out there who loved her and looked for her all those years. William held her as she cried, letting her release all the emotions of the day. When her tears finally subsided, Kate wiped her eyes and looked at her husband with determination. "I want to help Margaret," she said firmly. "She's lived her whole life with this hole in her heart. She lost her daughter, her husband. She has nobody. I want her to be part of our family." "Really part of it," William smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. What did you have in mind?" "I want her to move closer," Kate said. "She's living in that tiny flat in Oxfordshire all alone. We could help her find somewhere nearby, somewhere comfortable. Or she could stay here at the palace. We have plenty of room. We do, William agreed. But let's not overwhelm her. This is all very new for her, too. Maybe start by inviting her to stay for a few days, see how she feels. Then we can talk about more permanent arrangements. Kate nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his words. You're right. I'm just so afraid of losing her now that I've found her. She's 77 years old, William. We don't know how much time we have, which is exactly why we should make the most of whatever time we do have, William said gently. No pressure, no rushing. Just getting to know each other, building memories. That night, Kate couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her mother, about all the questions she wished she could ask. Had Carol ever felt different from her adoptive family? Had she ever wondered about her birth parents? What would she think if she knew the truth? Kate got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake William. She pulled on a robe and walked through the silent palace corridors. Without really thinking about where she was going, she found herself outside Margaret's guest room. She was about to walk away when she heard a sound from inside. Crying. Soft, heartbroken crying. Kate knocked gently on the door. Margaret? It's Kate, may I come in? The crying stopped. After a moment, Margaret's voice came through the door. Yes, please. Kate entered to find Margaret sitting by the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens. Her face was wet with tears and she held a handkerchief in her trembling hands. I'm sorry, Margaret said quickly. I didn't mean to wake anyone. I was trying to be quiet. Kate sat down beside her. You didn't wake me. I couldn't sleep either. She paused, then asked gently, What's wrong? Margaret laughed bitterly through her tears. What's wrong? Everything and nothing. I've spent 63 years dreaming of this day, imagining what it would be like to find my daughter. And now I have, but she's gone. I missed her entire life. I missed watching her grow up, seeing her first steps, hearing her first words. I missed her wedding, the birth of her children. I missed everything. Kate felt her own tears start again. I know. It's not fair. She died not knowing I existed, Margaret continued, her voice breaking. She died thinking her mother had abandoned her, not knowing that I was forced to give her up. Not knowing that I loved her from the moment I first held her. She didn't think she was abandoned, Kate said softly. She never knew she was adopted. Her parents kept it secret, so she lived her whole life thinking they were her biological parents. In a way, maybe that was a mercy. She never felt the pain of wondering why you gave her up. Margaret turned to look at Kate, her blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. Do you really think so? Or are you just trying to make me feel better? I really think so, Kate said honestly. My mother was happy. She had a good life. She was loved and she loved others. She raised a family, built a career, made a difference in the world. Yes, it's tragic that you never got to know her, but she didn't suffer because of that. She wasn't tormented by questions with no answers. Margaret nodded slowly, considering Kate's words. I suppose there's some comfort in that. And I have you now. Through you, I can know her a little bit, through your memories, your stories. And through the children, Kate added. They're her legacy. Every time Charlotte laughs, I hear my mother's laugh. When George shows kindness to someone smaller than him, I see my mother's compassion. They carry her forward. And they carry me forward too, don't they? Margaret said softly. Even though they just met me today, my blood runs through them. My DNA is part of who they are. Exactly, Kate said. You're part of our family now, not just because of biology, but because we choose you to be. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moon move slowly across the sky. Finally, Margaret spoke again, her voice steadier now. Tell me what she was like as a mother. Tell me how she raised you. Kate smiled, grateful for the chance to share these memories. She was patient but firm. She had rules, but she also knew when to bend them. I remember once when I was about 7, I broke her favorite vase playing ball in the house. I was terrified to tell her. But when I finally confessed, she didn't yell. She just asked if I was hurt, and when I said no, she said that was all that mattered. The vase could be replaced, but I couldn't. Margaret smiled through fresh tears. She sounds wise beyond her years. She was, Kate agreed. She always said that mistakes were how we learned. She taught me that failing at something didn't make me a failure. It just made me human. That lesson helped me so much when I married William and entered this strange world of royalty and protocol. I made mistakes, lots of them, but I remembered what she taught me. Kate continued sharing stories, painting a picture of Carol Middleton as a mother, a businesswoman, a grandmother. She told Margaret about the parties her mother had planned with such care, always making sure every child felt special. She talked about the business her mother had built from nothing, creating jobs and opportunities for others. She gave to charity quietly, Kate said. She didn't announce her donations or seek recognition. She just helped because it was the right thing to do. That's something I've tried to emulate in my own charity work. Margaret listened to every word, absorbing these glimpses of the daughter she had lost. She sounds like she was exactly the kind of person I hoped she would become. Kind, generous, successful. I'm so grateful she had a good life, even if I couldn't be part of it. You're part of it now, Kate said firmly, and I want you to know something. I plan to tell my children the whole story. Not now, they're too young to fully understand, but when they're older, I'll tell them about you, about what happened, about how you never stopped loving your daughter. I want them to understand that love doesn't end just because people are separated. Margaret reached out and took Kate's hand. Thank you. That means more to me than you can know. They talked until dawn began to lighten the sky. Kate told Margaret about her own struggles adjusting to royal life, about the intense media scrutiny, about the loneliness she had sometimes felt. She told her about William's support, about finding her purpose in charity work, about the joy of being a mother herself. Margaret shared more stories from her own life. She talked about Thomas, the husband who had loved her despite her past. She described the village where they had lived, the library where she had worked, the garden she had tended. Small details of a life lived simply but fully. As the sun rose fully, painting the gardens in shades of gold and pink, Kate realized she was exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from emotional release and connection. We should try to get some rest, Kate said, standing and stretching. The children will be up soon, and they'll want to spend more time with you. Margaret stood as well, looking much more peaceful than she had earlier. Thank you for sitting with me, Catherine. Thank you for listening to an old woman's tears and regrets. Kate hugged her tightly. They're not just your tears and regrets. They're part of our family story now, and we'll carry them together. Over the next few days, Margaret stayed at the palace. The children visited her every afternoon, bringing drawings they had made and stories about their day. Charlotte was particularly taken with Margaret, climbing into her lap to show her books and asking endless questions about when Margaret was young. George, with his natural curiosity, wanted to know everything about the family history. Margaret told him stories about growing up in post-war Britain, about rationing and rebuilding, about how different the world had been in her youth. George listened with fascination, already planning how he would incorporate these stories into his school project. Even shy Louis warmed up completely. By the third day, he was holding Margaret's hand as they walked through the gardens, pointing out his favorite flowers and showing her where he had seen a rabbit the week before. Kate watched these interactions with a full heart. Her children were building a relationship with their great-grandmother, creating memories that would last a lifetime. It was something she had never imagined possible. On the fourth evening, Kate and Margaret sat together in the library. William had taken the children to visit his father, giving the two women time alone. Kate had brought down a box she had been keeping in her closet, something she hadn't looked at since her mother died. These are my mother's journals, Kate said softly, setting the box on the table between them. She kept them faithfully for years. I found them after she passed, but I haven't been able to bring myself to read most of them. It felt too painful. Margaret looked at the box with wonder and fear. Are you sure you want to share these with me? I think you should have them, Kate said. Or at least I think we should read them together. These are her thoughts, her feelings, her daily life. Through these pages, you can know her in a way that no one else can. With trembling hands, Margaret opened the first journal. It was dated from when Carol was in her 20s before she had married Kate's father. The handwriting was neat and precise, so like Kate's own. They read together, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. Carol had written about her dreams and fears, her hopes for the future. She wrote about meeting Michael Middleton and falling in love. She described the joy of discovering she was pregnant with Kate. Margaret touched the words on the page as if she could somehow reach through time and touch her daughter. She sounds so happy, so full of life. They continued reading, moving through the journals chronologically. Carol had written about Kate's childhood, about her pride in her daughter's accomplishments, about her worries when Kate started dating William and entered the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. In one entry from shortly before the wedding, Carol had written something that made both Kate and Margaret stop breathing. Sometimes I look at Catherine and I wonder who she gets certain traits from. Not from me, not from Michael. The way she holds her head when she's thinking, the particular shade of her eyes, the shape of her hands. Michael jokes that she must be a changeling, but I know better. These little mysteries make me wonder sometimes about biology, about the hidden parts of ourselves we don't understand. But it doesn't matter where those traits come from. She's my daughter in every way that counts. Margaret's tears fell onto the page. She did wonder. Somewhere deep down she must have known. Kate wiped her own eyes. Maybe. Or maybe every parent sees mysteries in their children that don't quite add up. But you're right. Some part of her must have sensed that there was more to her story. They read late into the night, traveling through Carol's life via her own words. Margaret learned about the business Carol had built, about the challenges she had faced, about her thoughts on becoming a grandmother. Through these journals, Margaret got to know the daughter she had lost, understanding her in an intimate way that went beyond the stories Kate had shared. Near the end of the last journal, written just months before Carol died, there was an entry that made Kate's heart stop. Her mother had written about a dream she'd had. I dreamed last night of a woman I've never met. She had blue eyes like Catherine's and she was crying. She held out her arms to me and I wanted to go to her, but I couldn't move. When I woke, I had the strangest feeling of loss, as if I'd forgotten something important. It's probably nothing, just the medication playing tricks on my mind. But I can't shake the feeling that the woman in my dream was real, and that she was looking for me. Margaret let out a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She dreamed of me. At the end, she dreamed of me. Kate held Margaret as she cried, her own tears flowing freely. She knew. Somehow she knew. They sat together in the library surrounded by Carol's journals, these written pieces of a life lived fully. The clock chimed midnight, but neither of them noticed. They were lost in the story of a woman who had been daughter to one, mother to another, and the connecting thread between them. Finally, Margaret spoke, her voice hoarse from crying. I want you to keep these. They're your mother's legacy, her thoughts, her love for you written down. But thank you for letting me read them. Thank you for letting me know her this way. Kate shook her head. I want you to have copies made. These words, these thoughts, they're part of your daughter too. You deserve to have them, to read them whenever you want to feel close to her. Margaret hugged Kate tightly. You have your mother's generous heart. I see it in the way you treat people, the way you raise your children. She lives on through you, and I'm so grateful I get to witness that. Over the following weeks, Margaret became a regular presence in their lives. She moved into a comfortable cottage near the palace, close enough to visit regularly but with her own space and independence. The arrangement worked perfectly. Margaret was there for Sunday dinners, for the children's school plays, for quiet afternoons in the garden. Kate found herself calling Margaret several times a week, sometimes to share news, sometimes just to talk. Having this connection to her mother, this living link to Carol's past, helped ease the grief that had weighed on Kate since her mother's death. Margaret taught Charlotte how to bake the same biscuits she had made when she was young. She helped George with his history homework, sharing first-hand accounts of events he was studying. She read bedtime stories to Louis in a soft voice that reminded Kate achingly of her own mother. One afternoon in late autumn, Kate and Margaret sat together in Margaret's cottage. Rain pattered against the windows and a fire crackled in the hearth. Margaret had made tea, and they were looking through more photographs. These ones from Margaret's own youth. This is me at 16, Margaret said, pointing to a black and white photo of a young girl with hopeful eyes. This was taken just before I found out I was pregnant. I looked so young, so innocent. I had no idea how much my life was about to change. Kate studied the photograph, seeing the girl her grandmother had been. You were beautiful. You still are, Margaret smiled sadly. I was foolish. I thought the boy who got me pregnant loved me. He said all the right things, made all the right promises. But when I told him about the baby, he disappeared. His family moved away and I never saw him again. That must have been terrifying, Kate said softly, being so young and facing that alone. It was, Margaret admitted. My parents were so ashamed. They sent me away so the neighbors wouldn't know. I lived in that home for unwed mothers for 6 months. The other girls there, we became close. We understood each other's pain. But one by one, they all left after giving birth, and we never saw each other again. I've often wondered what happened to them. if they carried the same grief I did. Kate reached over and squeezed Margaret's hand. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. You were just a child yourself. I grew up quickly, Margaret said. After they took the baby, after they took Grace, I went home and tried to pretend nothing had happened. But I was different. I could see it in my parents' eyes. They looked at me with disappointment, with shame. Things were never the same between us. Did they know you were still searching for her? Kate asked. Margaret shook her head. No, they told me to forget, to move on. So I pretended I had. But every year on her birthday I would light a candle and pray that she was happy and safe. My parents never knew. After they died I searched more openly. But by then, so much time had passed. The trail was cold. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the rain. Then Margaret spoke again, her voice thoughtful. You know what's strange? I used to imagine what my daughter might look like, what kind of person she might become. In my imagination, she was always happy. I couldn't bear to think of her suffering. And now I know that she was happy. She had a good life. That brings me more peace than I can express. She did have a good life, Kate confirmed. And she gave me a good life. She taught me everything important. How to be strong. How to be kind. How to stand up for myself while still treating others with respect. Every good thing I do, every time I succeed at something, I think of her and try to make her proud. Margaret's eyes filled with tears again, but they were different tears than before. These were tears of gratitude rather than grief. She would be so proud of you, Catherine. You've handled everything with such grace. The pressure of being in the royal family, the constant scrutiny, raising your children in such unusual circumstances. You do it all with dignity and kindness. That's her legacy living through you. Kate felt emotion rising in her throat. I want to do something, she said suddenly. Something to honor her memory and your sacrifice. I've been thinking about starting a new charity initiative. Something to help young mothers who find themselves in difficult situations. To give them support and options so they don't have to go through what you went through. Margaret looked at Kate with surprise and deep emotion. That would be wonderful. Think of all the young women who could be helped, who wouldn't have to face what I faced, who wouldn't have to spend 63 years wondering and grieving. Will you help me? Kate asked. Your story, your experience, it could help shape the program. Make it something that really addresses what these women need. Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. I would be honored. If sharing my pain can help prevent others from experiencing the same thing, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Maybe there was a purpose to everything that happened. They spent the next hour discussing ideas for the charity. Kate took notes, excited about this new project that would honor both her mother and grandmother. It would be called the Grace Initiative, named after the name Margaret had given her daughter in those few precious hours they had together. As the afternoon wore on, Kate realized how much her life had changed since that morning, when William had opened the door and brought Margaret into their lives. She had gained a grandmother, yes, but she had gained so much more. She had gained a deeper understanding of her mother, of the complex web of circumstances that had shaped their family. She had gained perspective on loss and love, on the ways families could be torn apart and stitched back together. Thank you, Kate said suddenly, looking at Margaret with intense gratitude. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for not giving up after all those years. Thank you for being brave enough to come forward even though you didn't know how we would react. Margaret reached over and cupped Kate's face gently, the same way she had that first day. My dear girl, I should be thanking you. You could have turned me away. You could have been angry at me for disrupting your life. But instead you welcomed me with open arms. You gave me a family when I thought I would die alone. You gave me great-grandchildren to love. You gave me a chance to know my daughter through your memories and her journals. You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. Kate leaned into Margaret's touch, feeling the love and acceptance flowing between them. You're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again. You're part of our family now, and we don't let go of family. They sat together as the rain continued to fall, two women from different generations bound by blood and love, bridging the gap that circumstances had created. Outside, the world continued its busy pace, but inside that cottage, time seemed to slow, allowing them to savor this moment of connection and understanding. Later that evening, when Kate returned to the palace, William met her at the door. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. How is she? He asked softly. She's good, Kate said, her voice muffled against his chest. We're planning something together, a charity to help young mothers, We're calling it the Grace Initiative." William pulled back to look at her, his eyes filled with pride. "That's perfect. Your mother would love that." Kate nodded, tears threatening again. They seemed to come so easily these days, but they no longer felt heavy. They felt cleansing, healing. "I think she would. I think she'd be happy knowing that Margaret and I found each other. That something good came from all that pain." "I'm proud of you," William said, kissing her forehead. "The way you've handled all this, the way you've opened your heart to Margaret." "Not everyone would have done that. How could I not?" Kate said simply. "She's family, and family is everything." As they walked together through the palace corridors, Kate thought about that morning when William had opened the door and everything had changed. She had been nervous then, uncertain about what she was about to face. But now she understood that what had awaited her wasn't something to fear. It was a gift. A connection to her past, a bridge to her mother, a grandmother for her children, and a reminder that love could survive anything, even decades of separation. That night, as Kate tucked the children into bed, Charlotte asked, "Mommy, why was Great-Grandma Margaret sad for so long?" Kate sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people get separated from the ones they love, not because they want to be, but because they have no choice. Great-Grandma Margaret lost someone very important to her a long time ago, and it made her sad. But now she's found us, and she doesn't have to be sad anymore. Are we the people she lost?" George asked from his bed across the room. Kate smiled at her perceptive son. "In a way, yes. She lost someone we all love very much, someone who isn't here anymore. But through us, she can still feel connected to that person. We help keep their memory alive." "Granny Carol?" Louis asked softly. "Yes, darling," Kate confirmed. "Granny Carol. Great-Grandma Margaret is Granny Carol's mother. It's complicated, but the important thing is that she's family and we love her." Charlotte snuggled deeper into her blankets. "I'm glad she found us. She tells good stories and she makes me feel safe." "Me too," George agreed. "She knows a lot about history. She actually lived through things I'm learning about in school." Kate kissed each of her children goodnight, her heart full. As she turned off the lights and left their rooms, she reflected on how much could change in such a short time. A few weeks ago, she hadn't known Margaret existed. Now she couldn't imagine their lives without her. OG. In the months that followed, the Grace Initiative took shape. Kate and Margaret worked together, consulting with social workers, counselors, and other young mothers who had faced difficult decisions. The program would offer support, resources, and most importantly, options. No young woman would have to face an impossible choice alone, without information or assistance. The official announcement was made on what would have been Carol's birthday. Kate stood at the podium with Margaret beside her, explaining the mission of the Grace Initiative and why it mattered so much to their family. She didn't share all the details of Margaret's story, respecting her grandmother's privacy, but she shared enough to make clear why this cause was personal. The public response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Other women came forward with their own stories of loss and reunion, of closed adoptions and lifelong searches. The initiative struck a chord, touching hearts across the nation and beyond. Through it all, Margaret remained humble and gracious. She visited the centers they established, speaking quietly with young mothers, offering the wisdom she had gained through her own painful experience. She didn't preach or judge. She simply listened and supported, giving these young women what she had never had herself. Kate watched her grandmother work with these young mothers and saw the healing happening in real time. Every young woman Margaret helped, every crisis they averted, every family they kept together, it eased a little more of the pain Margaret had carried for so long. 1 year after William had opened that door and changed everything, the family gathered to celebrate Margaret's 78th birthday. The children had made cards and presents. William had arranged for a small but elegant celebration in the palace gardens. As they all stood together, 3 generations plus Margaret representing a 4th, Kate raised her glass in a toast. "To Margaret," she said, her voice strong and clear, "thank you for your courage in finding us. Thank you for the love you carried for 63 years. Thank you for being patient and persistent and never giving up hope. And thank you for the Grace Initiative, which will help countless other families stay together. You've taken your pain and turned it into something beautiful. We are so grateful to have you in our lives." Everyone raised their glasses and Margaret stood, tears streaming down her face once again, but this time they were purely tears of joy. "Thank you," she said simply. Thank you for giving an old woman a family when she thought she would finish her days alone. Thank you for honoring my daughter's memory. And thank you for showing me that love really can survive anything. Even time, even loss, even the worst circumstances. I love you all. As the celebration continued, Kate found a quiet moment to stand alone at the edge of the garden. She looked up at the sky, thinking of her mother. I hope you can see this, Mom, she whispered. I hope you know that your mother loved you, that she never stopped looking for you. And I hope you're proud of what we're doing in your name, you and Margaret together. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, and Kate smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The door William had opened that day had led to tears, yes, but also to healing, to love, to the completion of a circle that had been broken so long ago. And now, standing in this garden surrounded by family, Kate understood that sometimes the most unexpected gifts came through the doors we feared to open, and that love, once given, never truly disappeared. It simply waited, patient and enduring, for the chance to come home again.